Uh, this is our Bible study. We're in Luke chapter 17. Joe, you actually almost got me on that one.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I really did. Oops.
Oops.
Looks like. Hi, Janine. Okay. Okay. So. Okay. Well, they'll be back, I think. I just see Dave. Hi, Janine.
Well, I wasn't going to have Derwood come upstairs unless we could get you for sure, and so I'll have to go get him.
Yeah, we just started.
Pardon me?
We just started, so you didn't miss anything.
Okay. Well, I'll go get it. So your camera is not working tonight either.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
But we have been talking about you.
Yeah.
Well,
remember Wyman's prayer?
I hope it was good about it.
You remember Wyman's prayer, Janine?
Yeah, I'll go.
She's going to get Derwood.
Okay. Never
mind.
No. Go.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we remember several of those. Sometimes with laughter.
The one about the falling shorts.
All right, that's enough.
Okay.
Yes, who will ever forget that? Yeah, we'll never forget that. It was just a perfect moment.
Well, what
let me let Derwood know
that the prayer, but we were talking about you laughing at it, and how you get when you get laughing.
Yeah, I think I was all but rolling on the floor.
You were on the floor.
Right.
We had to help you up.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna go have Derwood come up.
Okay.
Now it's time to.
Did you say Forest Hill Church of Christ?
Oh yeah, this is the Church of Christ at Forest Hill. So no, I didn't say that. I said it differently.
We have shortfalls.
we have shortfalls. Okay, so now is the end of laughter, and we're going to take a look at Luke. Yeah, we're in verse 11. So let's start with Portia, and if you would read verse 11 through 19.
I'm sure she always gets to read first.
Would you like to read?
Mm-hmm.
Or Joe, we can start wherever you like.
Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. And as he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out with a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Oh, no. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? No one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well."
Okay. So we see another instance of Jesus' xenophilia, which is a major theme. You know, Jesus has this sort of surprising care for the outsider, the foreigner, and always the story in which the foreigner shows up, they look better than the Jews, who should know better.
Yeah,
right.
Know better.
And so this, you know, and Jesus he says that's how he expresses it. This is the kind of stuff too, you know, this is stuff that gets him into trouble as well. If you go remember back to the beginning of the book, Jesus' first sermon, don't you guys know about the widow and the jars of oil and all this kind of stuff. Don't you guys know the Old Testament stories in which Elijah went up and received care from the Sidonian widow, and but there were lots of widows in those days in Israel, and nothing was performed for them, right? Elisha healed the Naaman the leper, lots of lepers in those days among the Israelites, but he didn't heal them. See? So it's the same thing. I mean, this is actually, I think it intentionally evokes the story of Naaman because it has to do with leprosy.
This is our polio in the 50s.
Yeah.
I mean, you never got over leprosy.
Yeah, it depends on the kind, but but in a lot of cases, right.
They would have thought back then that once you have it, that's it. You'd never get rid of it.
Yeah, it's like it's so they do seem to have ways to get rid of it. And then if you read the laws in like Leviticus, it seems like some people do, because leprosy is probably not for them. For us, it means something very specific, but for them, it's probably a set of skin issues. Some of which are contagious and some of which are not. And it seems like
just call them all leprosy.
Right. Some of them you can get better from, and some of them are chronic and you don't. And it seems like these guys have the chronic bad version. But they have procedures that they're supposed to go show yourself to the priest. You know, if nobody ever got better, there would be no procedures for that, right? But with some cases, you would assume nobody's ever going to get better. And it's a really terrible disease, so you don't want to get it. And they did believe it was contagious. I don't know if it actually is.
Leprosy.
But they kept their distance.
Yeah,
That's
they did.
the key.
Yeah, because like they don't have public health stuff. I mean, nothing. I mean, their public health stuff's very rudimentary. So they knew about like quarantine, and they knew you could get it, you know, because of proximity, but they didn't really understand what was and was not contagious and why, right? How is it? I mean, we had this discussion at the beginning of COVID. Is it from surfaces? Is it from air? And eventually we learned that it was from air particulates, right? But only over a certain distance and not outside. And think about, that was 2020, and think about how long it took us to figure out exactly how communicable it is.
Or Legionnaire's disease.
Yeah.
Yeah, that with that for years.
That's right. That's a good example. Yeah, that one took a long time for people to figure out how is it that it, you know, and then I didn't know about it until COVID, and then they were like, watch out if your building's been shut off for a long time, and the water is going to have Legionnaire's disease and flush everything. So
it's not possible that they didn't understand that Jesus healed them.
Oh yeah.
It's not real specific here about what Jesus did. They see them, and then he says, "Go show yourself to the priest and tell what he did."
Yeah. It's but to them they would know, like, you don't go to the priest until you're healed. So
Because I was wondering what the purpose of going to the priest.
Yeah.
While they were
Yeah,
praying, they got better.
that's right.
The priest,
The priest is supposed to, if you go to Leviticus, the priest is supposed to check and look at everything, the different signs, you know, if there's hair or not, or white spots or whatever.
Okay.
And if it's if the priest basically performs a public health role.
Well, they would know it was something special because it says
Well,
as they went.
Yeah.
they went on their way.
Their symptoms
So it wasn't
disappear.
when they're standing right there in front of Jesus. So
Because he wanted to see their faith, maybe when, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus sometimes he'll do miracles remotely, just remote miracles occasionally. But in this, the mechanism, you know, is not really ever important. It's not like, you know, when Jesus puts the mud over the guy's eyes. I mean, it's not like he has to do that.
No.
He just does it. There are reasons to do it, but he doesn't have to.
Well, like the soldiers that came to him about his servant. And
Yeah.
he even said to Jesus, "You don't even have to come to my house.
That's right. Yeah,
Because I know that you can just
that's
do
an
it from wherever you are."
That's another
basically.
of
Right.
Jesus's xenophilia stories. And look at this centurion. This Gentile is better than you guys. But he, but realize too, Jesus works on the presumption that the Jews should be better because they have the law. The law does not put them at a disadvantage; it puts them at an advantage.
Supposedly.
But so it's a shame. He's shaming them, saying like, "You guys ought to know better." It's not exactly a compliment. It's not like the Gentiles are just better than y'all. He's saying y'all are supposed to be better, and you're worse. Right? So you can see how that would be upsetting. Jesus is saying things that are upsetting to people. But this is one that he comes back to over and over again, which is that disjunction, right, of expectations that you who have the law ought to know better and do better. You don't. Here are these Gentiles doing better than you, even though they've got everything wrong. That's kind of the logic, right? Even a Samaritan is better about this than you guys. It would be very insulting in his day, and
didn't the Samaritans keep the law?
They did. They actually may have had a more accurate version of it. They have their own manuscript tradition, and
But they didn't have a temple.
they had high places that they did the sacrifices at. So they had the Torah, though not in all ways more accurate, but in some respects more accurate. And it's an important part of text criticism for the Old Testament. It's an important manuscript tradition, and they go back and say, well, what does it say in the Samaritan manuscripts that we have? So they have the law. I mean, the difference between them is the place of worship.
Just eliminate this.
And then the canon, scriptures. So what do you leave in? Basically, they're mostly just the Torah.
So this is what you would get.
And then beyond that, the set of beliefs are mostly the same. They're not all the same, and we're still actually learning a lot about the Samaritans.
Because the Samaritans were separated from the other Jews because they intermarried with other people.
Yeah, so this goes back to the Assyrians came in, and Samaria is geographically what used to be the northern kingdom of Israel. So think Ahab and all those characters, Jehu and all the bloodthirsty people, and Elijah and Elisha also. And that also that's the region that he's in, by the way. So there's kind of resonances there.
Yeah, he's on the Samaritan border.
Right. Border, yeah. So Galilee and Samaria are basically like what used to be the northern kingdom of Israel. And so Assyria wipes them out, almost wipes out Judah, but doesn't, and then carries a lot of people off. They kind of scatter them to the winds. The Babylonians like to concentrate exiles, but the Assyrians kind of scattered them. And but some of them they left. A lot of them they left, and they intermarried. But they also seem to have just held on to a lot of the beliefs that they had in the days of the Northern Kingdom. Worship at the high places, not in Jerusalem. But they weren't kind of wacky pagans. They just worshipped in a different place and did some things differently. But like I said, we've learned a lot just in the last several decades about the Samaritans. We're still learning a lot and so a lot of our assumptions about them have kind of been overturned. And they used to think they were a lot more different than the Jews than they actually were.
Interesting that the 10 men who with the leprosy were, I mean, we don't know how many others are in the too. We know that this is the
Yeah, it seems to.
but they were together.
Yeah.
In their illness, they were together.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it seems like the story strongly implies that the others are Jews. But you're right; it doesn't say that outright. Because that's kind of seems to be the point, right? That they ought to be better, and this foreigner knows what's what.
Not everyone is going to be thankful.
Yeah, that's true. That's
But
true.
it points out that he was a Samaritan.
Yeah, that does
Tells
seem.
me the others were.
Does seem to be for it. Now it could be that some of the others are Samaritans, but if you're going to have one guy that's going to come back, yeah, that seems to be the logic, that Jesus is working with. Like, it ought to be the Jew that comes back and says thank you. If there's going to be one, it should be all 10, but if it's going to be one, it really ought to be a Jew.
Just like the Samaritan story.
Yeah.
The guys that should have been first aid people never even slowed down.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, Jesus, this is really unusual behavior for a Jew. Even though Jesus is working with some of their common assumptions and kind of playing off of them. But I think, in his day, yeah, he's working against the kind of, the Jewish kind of nationalism, we're better, we're more righteous, we're more holy, and if you're the Messiah, you need to kill the Romans. That whole thing sort of runs together, right? Because if you don't think that you're better than everybody else, then what's wrong with the Romans? I mean, if you think, well, we're pretty stiff-necked, we're pretty sinful, it's kind of hard to make the argument that we ought to get rid of the Romans, because you can't really say they're doing worse than we would.
And I think that this, the prejudice that comes through in stories about Samaritans, I think that a lot of times that's lost on us. But Jesus always brings it out. That these were the chosen people, and yet they don't get it, and they don't come back and say thank you.
Yeah.
But the Samaritan comes back and says thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus. I mean, it's tough for us to. It's like this kind of ethnic tension and religious tension that's hard for us to. I mean, it's like Northern Ireland or like Israel right now, Israel and the Palestinians. It's kind of more on that level. So, and Jesus is sort of putting his finger in it, and is not afraid to bring it up. So it's this is where you see Jesus kind of engaging with very, the stuff of his day.
I have to watch myself in this story as you're talking. I'm thinking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I was kind of thinking of scenarios like what? How do I, not comparing, but as a Christian, am I the one that is don't get it sometimes? You know what I mean? But sometimes maybe I'm the one that don't get it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think that's right.
Or selective conversion. We do a lot of that in the Church of Christ.
How do you mean? Spell that out.
Oh, look at the kind of life he lives. He wouldn't be interested in being a Christian anyhow. Don't waste your time.
Okay. Yeah.
And that takes me
Yeah.
back to that the other thing. When you point your finger at somebody else, you better look at the three fingers that are pointing back at yourself.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. And that famous line that Joe stole from that minister friend of ours.
Well, I
in
told him I
Texas.
did.
Yeah, Sunday morning. He'd go, "Good morning, saints." Everybody, "Good morning. Good morning, sinners."
Oh.
Good
morning.
Yeah.
Good morning. You know, a couple of people would answer
Yeah.
because that's what we all are.
Yeah.
You know, and I just remember that. That is just.
That's a nice version of Luther's simul peccatoris et sanctoris, which
That's
is
exactly what I was wanting to do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Sure you
Well,
are.
it's just his a simul
Of course.
at once saints and sinners.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think we are often we often overlook the fact that other people have sometimes non-Christians have a relationship with God
Yeah.
and express thanks and that's real, even if they don't know all the stuff that we would,
Yeah.
and yet we can often lack gratitude.
Yeah, because I was thinking my coworker, her life is so much different from mine, but I could see where she always said, "I thank God," and even though her life is a little different, I can see like she's still thankful for things, and sometimes we can be a critical, but you're not, but
Yeah,
and sometimes you have to step back.
yeah. I mean,
But,
people pray. People that are like don't go to church or don't even have any defined religious view, they do pray and like say thank you. It's really weird, but they do it. They do it, and that's what's going on in the story. He doesn't really have the resources to maybe fully understand Jesus in the way that Jesus wants people to understand him, but he knows he ought to say thanks.
You need to be thankful.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
like she doesn't believe in Jesus, but she believes in God. And but I let her have it because I didn't want. I let her. I don't want to go into. I mean, we did it before going into a little bit detail
Yeah.
about that, but I wanted to give her some kind of like at least I'm not better than you because.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm not better than you because. And then I wonder sometimes if I act like I'm a little bit better. You know?
Yeah.
You
That's a
gotta-
good
you
thing
know
to-
what I mean?
That's a good thing to wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be aware of that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
my poster boy for prison ministry, and you all know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
If the only person we ever change, the only person we ever see that we've helped is Lewis Hamilton. We have been total success.
Yeah.
We don't have to count numbers. We don't have to say, well, how many birthday cards did we send and nobody even wrote back to us? Then, lo and behold, there's somebody like Tim the other day that does write back to us. It says,
Yeah.
Welcome. I welcomed your communication. You've been McCarthy.
And people
What do we
don't,
do to do anything for you?
people don't always tell you how much you've helped them.
You know,
So you really have to let go of that and let God do it
yeah,
because
you do what
He
he
is
tells
doing it.
you do what he tells you to do.
That's right.
And don't be worried about
Yeah.
looking for
No.
thanks or credit or something like that. If I can do something that he's told me to do, that's it.
Yeah.
That's the good point. That's the thing to look forward to doing.
Just put it out there. God does it.
Yes.
It's just stuff we can't understand.
Yeah.
I remember when Brad's best friend got out and was on the other side of the fence, and Brad walked as far as he could with him till he was prevented from going any further with him. And here's Tony going up to the parking lot in the car. See you.
Hmm.
And it took him weeks.
Hmm.
Tony's out and I'm not.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
I'm
know
sorry.
that we are being watched all the time. I worked some years ago in lawyer in town who was fairly, he had a partner who was Jewish. And one of the reasons I went to work with him was that he was a Christian. And his secretary told me that there are many times, he said, when I see his partner treating his clients more Christian than his supposedly Christian lawyer
That's something.
treated his clients.
Yeah.
His Jewish partner was more sympathetic and compassionate, more, than the Christian.
Well, I think we often make the mistake of seeing the self-description of Christian and seeing virtue where it's not there and missing it among people who are not self-described Christians.
Well, one of the things you said the other day, I thought about a lot of sense in that is that the kingdom of God is wherever God's will is being done.
Yeah. Yeah, he's better to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that people who are doing God's will, who may not even be Christians, that's the influence of God's kingdom.
Yeah.
You'd be able to sleep.
Yeah. That's a. And I'll just say this, and we'll get to the next little part. But
Yourself.
that way of thinking is exactly it's what you see in Acts. It's a slightly modified version of it. But if the Spirit's here, then then we've got to catch up. If the Spirit's converting Gentiles, then they're Christians. If the Spirit makes them Christian, then it counts. And we don't have to. There's nothing really to debate beyond that, right? The Spirit already just showed up, right? So if you see, I think, if you see the fruit of the Spirit in somebody's life, you say, "Oh, great, God's at work." And you don't have to say, you don't have to see just not what's there, right?
That's what we're gonna do.
I'm interested in us talking.
Just as it's just a picture that was taken some years ago, like,
Oh yeah.
and it just shows us it doesn't show really happening. And the problem is when people can't even really understand this. It's not very satisfactory. We may have to just give up watching.
How different can we do other things, or do worship, or how different and still be brothers?
When
Yeah.
man talks, I can understand
I
him.
remember Lemoyne
But
Lewis.
when the